My name's Nathaniel Bronis. I've been involved in field research since right around 2009, where I came into this summer of '09. I had a sighting in the state of Michigan, where I'm from, and essentially I was out scouting for deer on the backside of my property, preparing to learn. I was trying to learn how to deer hunt, essentially. And during that process of scouting and finding bedding areas where the deer were congregating in the summer, trying to locate like doe bedding areas and where their fawns are hanging out, and where the bachelor groups of bucks are grouping up in the summer. In July, in mid-afternoon, I was out hiking along a transition from our property onto our neighbor's property, who we had permission to hunt around their property. And I was out crossing fence lines right over to their property, and going to hook up to an ATV trail that would then contour all this bedding area that the does had been previously hanging out by, near these old rock piles where farmers stacked up all the rocks they'd plow the ground. And during that process, I saw a figure coming through like this young aspen, or we would call it poplar over by where we're at, and just a figure looming in there. And I thought it was my neighbor, maybe in a blackout outfit, doing like in a turkey blind that's like blacked out inside. So, because that's what you tell yourself. You see something and you assume it's a person. So we start converging on the same point. I'm quietly walking. It's just weaving in and out of the trees and coming out, and eventually it clears the sun. And right at about that point, probably 120 feet away, I got to see what was obviously not my neighbor. It was about 120 feet away. I could see what was obviously a very muscular, dark-haired individual, a Sasquatch, very, very plainly not anything else. You could see skin detail on the face and the tops of the fingers. You could see thin hair on the neck, and you could see oil shining as it would turn its head. You could see oil where it was all dirty and oily, reflecting light back on its cheeks, its forehead, all that stuff. You could see calloused kneecaps where there were no hair. It was just chalky white, really dry looking, no hair there, completely missing hair. And you could see all the muscle contour lines, like the tricep. You could see the edge of the bicep, the main load head of the forearm. You could see the top of the shoulder and the delts crowning over each other, casting shadows over each other. The hair had directional flow to it, like you'd see on a German Shepherd, contouring muscle groups. It was pretty amazing to see all this detail. And time just stopped. Like what you perceive to be, a few seconds just feels like ages. Like you're unable to move and you're locked in this pause in time. And essentially, we just both are staring. It comes out and looks down at the two-track, and that's when we locked eyes. It did a double take, looked toward me, and I was staring at it, and we're just staring at each other down. And eventually, what feels like an hour was actually probably 8 to 10 seconds. I have no way of calculating actually how much time it was. It had to have been shorter than what I perceive in my mind, in the memory. And it eventually gets upset and pulls its head away from looking at me and scrunches up its whole face and exhales. And that's when you could see the muscles flex, because it tensed up when it flexed. It just went like that, and it exhaled. You could tell it let air out. I couldn't really hear it, but I could tell it let air out. And then it dropped what apparently was carrying was a dead fawn, just dropped it on the ground, like rolled it. It was carrying it over its forearm, and it just rolled it off onto the ground, and it looked back up, and then it did this barge U-turn back into the brush. And as it hit the brush, it could have gone back the way it come out, and it would have been easier for it, but it chose to go through this brush, and as it went through, it would just grab handfuls of this willow brush, which grows about yay tall, and it would just grab it and rip it up and throw it, and then smash some of it, fold some over. It was showing me its strength. And that's when the fear, you run cold. You're just shaking, you're locked up. Your heart is pounding so hard that you can hear your heart just pounding in your ears, and your eyes are visibly shaking because your heart is beating so hard. And that whole experience, even after it diverted into the woods and was gone, I couldn't even move for at least 2 or 3 minutes because I was scared. I was like, if I run, is it going to come back and chase me? Or if I stay here also, is it going to take that as a continued challenge and potentially come and get me? But so you're in a panic and you're frozen. You don't know what to do. It was something else. So I guess that's as short as I can make that event. And ever since then, I went through about a year of completely being mortified about being outside in natural spaces, or couldn't even feed the animals at night. Walking past a sliding glass door at night was too much. Like all the lights had to be on, and you couldn't bring yourself to do anything outside after dark. But after about a year, I started watching documentaries about chimps and gorillas, and I started to hear very similar things to what I witnessed about behavior and actions of these animals, and it just made it more real and less spooky and monstrous. It made it more of a reality of something living out there just doing its thing, and we were unlucky enough to cross paths. And with all of that, I ended up eventually just being completely captured with interest about trying to figure out what these things are, what they do, how they do what they do, and live in this wild natural environment and remain completely hidden. And that just led me down a road toward field research. And then I moved out here to the Pacific and slightly inland Northwest area, and starting to do a lot of data projects and collecting information. That's how I got into it.
Why you said it left the deer?
Yeah, it just rolled it off of its forearm.
Why do you think it did that? So it could get away faster, or?
I don't know. It might have been like a situation where it's like a consolation prize. Like I'm fine. You can have it. I've had what I wanted. Or maybe it was a way to distract me if I decided to continue to approach. I have no idea. All I can tell you is that maybe, and there was still meat left on. We went back. When we went back, I brought my parents, and I had a rifle with me and all that. My cousin, who told me I was lying the whole time, he actually found footprints in the brush where it ripped up all the willow. Mm-hmm. And so he had to completely revise calling me a liar. Like, I don't know, something did go through here, but I'm not saying it was a Bigfoot, but something went through here. And he's like looking at all the torn up willow laying around that was thrown like 20, 30 feet. And, but the deer was completely stripped of meat. Its organs were gone. The only meat left was on the front shoulders and legs and neck. That was it. The top of the skull was punched in, just straight in over the cranium. Like you could push on the hide, and it would be hollow down into the brain case. So, and there was a big laceration that ran from like the right side eyebrow to the back of the ear, a huge laceration. So it's almost like those giant rock piles I had mentioned earlier. This thing had just been walking through the grass, found this fawn curled up in the grass, and saw the rock piles, saw the fawn, and decided to get one and just give it a whap. It's a dead deer, dead fawn. Easy food. And it just left what was left on the body there on the 2-track and left. I don't know if it was trying to just lighten its load, or if it just like, fine, you take this, I'm out of here. Don't know. Been back in like 2011. I used to go out and deer hunt this area, and this was after my sighting. So it would actually have been, 2010 and 2011. I think it was 2010. And I was out there trying to get the attention of whatever this thing was. And so I'd tried putting out apples and food, all different kinds of things, bread, you name it. And then I heard about people trying putting peanut butter out in the woods. And so I bought the biggest jar of peanut butter you could buy at Walmart, the Great Value pound-and-a-half jar, a huge one. And so I found this really cool secluded spot where I'd found what looked like footprints before. And so I decided I was going to set up and try putting out this peanut butter in a tree. So I put it up in the craw of this cedar at about, I want to say close to 7 feet, probably 6.5 feet. And I just wedged it up between the branches. I'd taken the seal off and put the lid back on, cinched it down pretty tight. But the whole way back and forth out there, when I'd go out there to check on it and see if it was still there, I would sing the whole way in and whistle, and then I would unscrew the lid and then screw it back on, and I'd do that a variety of times. And then after about a week of not seeing it touched, I came back on the, I think it would have been, it probably 3 days after the very last time. I didn't come back for a short bit. I just left it. And then I came back, I probably at that week, the weekend following, and the jar was completely gone. Didn't find it. There was nothing there whatsoever. And then another week passed, and I just had totally forgotten about it. And then one day on the hike out there where I go back in toward my deer stand, I went back down. So, you know, I'm going to go check and see where that, where I put the peanut butter jar. And I went out there, and the peanut butter jar was sitting there on the ground right by the tree where it had not been previously at all the week before. And it was completely cleaned empty. And there was a pine cone inside of the, now inside the jar with the lid screwed back on. So that was weird. Really interesting. But that's the story. Report years ago. And this report, the gentleman, they had a farm when he was young, and they had a kinds of weird activity all throughout his young adult life, and then he ended up inheriting the farm, and he continued to raise chickens on his family's farm. And he had all kinds, and there was a channel, I guess they had catfish in this slow-moving channel off the main river there, and he would always go to try to catch catfish, and he could never really catch any there. I don't know if he just didn't know what he was doing, or there weren't very many or in that area or what, but there were supposed to be some in there. But he raised chickens, and then routinely, his entire life growing up, they'd have chickens go missing. And even when he was a kid, his dad said that the chickens would go missing and then dead animals would show up around the property. And he'd never connected the dots. But after he inherited the farm, the second year that he started running the farm, after his family was too old to really do anything, so he basically took over all responsibilities. He said that the chickens would, it was the second year he was running stuff, that spring, they had encounters with what they thought was a person coming onto the property. And turns out, in the long run, it wasn't a person, but it was a Sasquatch that had been stealing 3 chickens a night out of the coop, and it would actually open the door, go into the coop, take the chickens, and close the door. And they didn't have any idea what was going on for several weeks until they actually went into the chicken coop and to get eggs, the first eggs of the season or something. I don't know how that works, and he said that there were footprints in the mud in the chicken coop. And not only that, at the back porch behind the house, because the chicken coop's like on the side of the house, back porch, they found 3 dead catfish that long just laid out on the porch, on the back porch, just laying there, soaking wet, dead. Not, and they no one knows where they came from. They didn't get there by themselves. So it was a really interesting story. And he went on to say that he actually got to see 2 different individuals on that property over the next 15 years before they sold the land. And that was also in Michigan. Probably back, I think, in the early 90s. So.
Went into a gas station, and there was this guy that I had asked who, works in government, and I asked him if he had seen any Sasquatch. He's been up in the woods, doing all kinds of stuff. And he wouldn't answer, which, I kind of went, well, either he doesn't know something or he doesn't want to talk about it. And he knows I put out videos on Bigfoot, so he probably just doesn't want anything out there. But so I think it was like a month later or more, I had mentioned to somebody that I'd talked to him, and he kind of gave me that no comment response. And he goes, yeah, I was talking to him one time, and he told me this story about when he was young. Him and a friend, they were up in the woods, and they saw a campfire in the distance, some little shimmer of light. And so they quietly snuck up on this camp to see who it was. And as they got closer, you know, they were really getting down low and sneaking in, and they got behind this log. And he said that when he popped up they popped up and looked over the log, they saw a creature sitting in front of a fire that had wings like a giant bat. And as they were looking over, one of them popped a stick and broke it or something, made a noise. And the thing kind of did this, and it slapped its hands together at the end of the wings and put the fire out and then flew away. And so that was the story this guy had told me. So I don't know what that was.
All right, well, it's the last night of our camp out at this undisclosed location in the Selkirk Mountains. Will, the grass man, Ulmer, and I are the last man standing. Everybody else has gone home. And we're hoping maybe, you know, with smaller numbers that might incite some activity. We had Aaron stop back by today, brought his son. Had his son run around, scream, holler, laugh, you know, just general children playing noises. So that might help and act as a attractant. And we're going to see what happens. This is day 7 for me. And what day is it for you, Will?
Day 4.
Day 4. So, you know, I've had myself a little squatchathon this week, and I've had pretty good time. So even if nothing happens tonight, I had a good time camping. So, but I really want something to happen. But you know how it goes. So we'll check in the morning or later tonight if something happens, and give you an update. Just heard a very distinct knock coming from the east. It's about 7:04 p.m. Just one single knock, but it was very clear. I'm pretty sure at least one of our audio recorders got it. We're both rolling audio. So that's encouraging. So Will heard another knock in the opposite direction that we heard the first knock. So it makes me wonder if they've moved past us down to that area, or if it's a different group, or I mean, it could be something completely different. It might not even have been Bigfoot, or it might not even have been a knock. It might have been another animal. But the vibe's a little different tonight. We've got a really full moon, and we can see really well. It's definitely a good night. So just a couple of seconds ago, Will and I saw this bright light come up over the trees and then fade out like a flare, kind of dim out from the west, which is the direction where we heard that last knock. So we're now firmly Bigfoot is an alien believers.
Some mothership.
Yeah. It was weird though, seriously, but probably not Bigfoot. All right, so our camera trap didn't really yield any interesting results, but we've still got a bunch of audio and some thermal footage that Will left his thermal out on record all night one night. It was actually a night we thought we heard something in the camp, so it'll be interesting to see what's on there. Plus, I've got some audio that I need to go through. I left a recorder out every night. But we'll see. You know, I'm sure by the time I post this, I'll have gone through all that, and we'll include anything significant that we heard or saw. So anyway, guys, thanks for following my little adventure here. There's more to come. After today, I start my drive back to Alaska, and you know, we're going to stop at some squashy spots on the way. That's hard to say. So, all right, stay tuned.